if you thought I was bagging on Corbu last time,
You've got.
I've gotten deeper into the chapters. I think
Oh my God, you hadn't even finished the book and you were doing
no,
a mid book report.
no, I was giving you a 5 chapters in book report.
You have more ranting to do. Maybe we need to wait till you're done, because maybe there's a happy ending. You seem very emotional
I
about this book.
do. I. It's interesting how we choose our heroes. I'm not saying he was any of mine, but it was just one of those
We
like
general heroes.
the
Yeah.
general we of
That the
architecture
architecture schools proclaim into
is
architect. Yeah.
forget the fact that he aligned himself with the Nazis and immediately when he saw the opportunity to deal with the people in power became a Vichy. Just
Character.
a
You're
little
talking about
thing. So
character now. You're not talking about the work anymore. Now you're talking about character.
no, not really. So the more and more I get into it, the more and more I'm like, wait, why can't
Well,
we
I
see
mean
past
that
this?
the interesting conversation there really is, I think, I mean, that's how I framed it, but I think it kind of applies, right? It's like there's what you can judge face value without knowing all
Right,
that backstory, which maybe now
right.
you've completely poisoned the well. But there is that about all forms of art and architecture projects. You have one story, which is the one that you're interpreting in the moment by experiencing the thing. And then there's all this other stuff that it actually took to make that or become the
Yeah.
person. And sometimes those two worlds bleed into each other, like you're experiencing by hearing this
Yeah.
historical account, right?
You're
But
like,
most of the time,
oh,
it doesn't happen quite often.
true, true. I will say it further galvanized my opinion of the unheralded Pierre Jeanneret, his cousin, who
Unheralded, yes.
um, did a lot to advance Corb's career, I guess. And
Many
then,
in architecture do
yeah,
for their firms, for
true.
the starchitects, and for,
Yeah.
right? It's never a singular act in
Oh,
this
yeah, yeah,
profession.
exactly. I started to familiarize myself with some of his kind of independent work. He did not align himself with the Nazis or the Vichy when they actually had a very strong falling out
Wait,
between
what
the
is
two
this
of them.
word you keep using? I'm not.
The Vichy is basically the French fascists, the ones
Oh,
that
okay.
aligned themselves with Hitler during World War II. Well,
Okay.
remember, I've got a house full of history nerds, in me
You've been you
particular.
in these conversations, so
Yes.
you're aware
And
of
and so
context.
just knowing the background of like basically how they sold their country down the river to it's just kind of interesting that like you hear this guy basically it's like, oh no, my career's over. And like Pierre, he went to unoccupied France and even helped out with the French resistance. And where's the books about this guy? Like in some of his independent work that he did on his own bears striking resemblance to the things that they did together. And so you're like, oh, huh. Maybe I'm putting two and two together and getting seven. But I honestly think that one of the interesting things is that a lot of the more pioneering work attributed to Corb could have been attributed to his cousin,
So you're
but
just saying
wasn't.
he's taking credit for the ideas that
It's a
happened in his office.
right now it's a speculation
More chapters.
because
How many chapters in are
exactly
you?
I'm 3/4 of the way through.
Okay. How many
So
chap audio listening is it
um,
total?
being able to string 10 or 11 together. So
Yeah.
that's the problem.
Right. Well, it's not the Fountainhead. 60
Oh my
hours of
gosh. Yeah.
audiobook.
Yeah.
How will I ever finish?
You're holding the book, a small
Right.
paperback, and it's like this thick.
Yes,
It was,
exactly.
yeah. I read that. Anthem by Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand.
Mm-hmm.
Anthem was actually a good read. It's quick, easy,
Shorter. Yeah.
shorter in the
Prolific
scheme of
writing,
things.
though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yesterday was the start of our in-person meetings for ACE because we know that I love volunteering for the ACE program. And I was passing around the sign-in sheet so that it's just like, look to make sure your name's on the list. And then they like, were just looking at it blankly. And I'm like, you know what your name is, right? Yeah, yes, I know what my name is. I'm like,
Wow.
I don't know why
A
it
little
just kind of
snappy
came.
there, Cormac.
Well, it was just like they paused and they were like staring at the thing. And I'm like, there's only 4 names on this thing. You got to have been able to find your name that quickly.
Okay.
But actually, that the kid that I said that to is super excited about architecture, has been very interested in it for a very long time. And you can just tell that they're like really eager to kind of get into this program. So, yeah.
That's high school kids, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, some of them I'm like,
what are they excited about? I'm curious what a high schooler is excited about going into this program and maybe
learning. So as I was explaining to the group really yesterday, was the fact that ACE is about exposing high school students to all of the different facets of the AEC community. They kind of just shuffle it around so it spells out ACE, but architecture, construction, and engineering. And that it gives you an opportunity to learn about all of the different people that you will encounter in this profession, from the contractors and all the different things that contractors do, to all of the different types of engineering and architecture in a variety of different forms: interiors, general architecture, landscape, all those things. So, and they were excited about the fact that they could learn more about what they think is kind of like their path. There's some people who they chose architecture really early on and just kind of kept pursuing it. I was one of those weird people that no matter what kind of roadblock, whether it's the army or whatever else, I was going to become an architect because that's what I wanted to do.
That was a detour. That was a detour.
That's true. It's just few detours. Right. And so this kid seems like that. Like the way he was talking is like he's already bit the apple. He really wants to be an architect. And so I think, and it sounds like he's been doing a lot to expose himself to what architecture really is, which is kind of interesting. And, not a lot of people, even people that I know who ultimately ended up becoming architects, they were like, well, I started school and I didn't really know I wanted to go into architecture school, or architecture sounded cool, but I really don't know anything about it, kind of thing. And so, there's a lot of people who don't really know what the profession's about when they decide, hey, I'm going to, go study for 5-6 years to become an architect. And that's the thing that I kind of like about ACE, is that when these kids get into this program, whether they're freshman to senior, and in fact, I've got 2 freshmen, one didn't show up last night, but, in my small group. So they break it up into small groups, and my small group is 2 freshmen, a sophomore, and a senior. The 5th one is, but they may or may not show up. And it's just like starting that kind of exposure of like, is this what you want to do? Is it just interesting? Is this just an extracurricular activity that you're doing? Because ultimately, if you pass that, you get 3 college credits. Because that's what this particular program for ACE Southwest Michigan, how they basically function is that they actually get college credits out of it, which is awesome.
Nice.
They can compete for scholarships, which is also great.
What do they apply to?
Well, so specifically this particular program, they're getting general courses from Lawrence Technological University, the LTU, and go Blue Devils. I think that's their mascot. I know somebody's going to tell me off once they listen to this show. But I think it's just general education stuff that they get. So it's like some 101 level course type thing. But I mean, if you think about it, if you're going into college, you've got, and I believe it's transferable to other schools. I mean, because it is through an accredited school. And so if they go somewhere else, I believe it comes with them. Just kind of like, it's almost the same thing as like if you take AP and you get like a 4 or a 5 on your test, and universities will accept that, give you credit for like a 101 course.
Right.
And so I think it's like that. But it's awesome because it gives you, like I said, said this countless times when we always talk about ACE, because it's that time of year, at the beginning of the year, where we get to do this. And since I'm not teaching this semester, I get the opportunity to actually do this. And I think it's my 9th year doing it. Yeah. So in my 9th year doing it, and new crop of kids to either mold into people who are at least informed about what the professions are. I mean, I'm not, obviously shaping them to become architects. We're honestly here to give them, it's exposure. And then we talk about it, I'll say this, you'll love this. This was kind of great. So one of them, there was bags on each of the desks, and that bag was for the group and it was filled with like the big Legos, like kind of like the toddler size Legos. And each bag had the exact same colors and the exact same shapes in each of the bags of all of the different groups. And in basically a plastic tub on a table kind of away from them was something that one of the mentors built, just a random shapes with everything else, with all the colors, in a way to kind of like learn communication skills, to like basically how am I to communicate what I see without actually doing it. Is that one of the students would go up, they would look at the shape, look at the color arrangements and everything else, and then come back and try to instruct the group on how to construct it, what goes where and all this other stuff. It was honestly wild, because you walk all the way up, like, I don't know, like 40, 50 feet away from your table, and you go over to this thing and one person's just looking at it, and they're studying the structure, and then they have to come back and tell everybody. They can't touch it. They can't pick anything up. They're just trying to communicate, pick up the single red or the 4 blue and things like that. And this goes next to that, and this sits on top of that and that. And the first time, we did it a couple of times just to see if we could get better. The first time they did it did not go well. I mean,
So what happened? Give some examples.
Well, it was just like they would go up, they would sit there, and they would study it, they would look at it, and they would and you can kind of see all of the kids, they would like shake their heads like, oh yeah, I got it now. And then they would come back, and by the time they got back to the table, would have completely forgotten what they saw. And they're like, I think this is here. I think this is here. And then they would switch, and then the next kid would have to go up there, and then the rest of the group. And the next kid would go up, and they would look at it and think, oh, no, we got this all wrong. And they would disassemble it and then talk about reassembly, talk them through the reassembly. And then that kept happening over and over again. I'm like, this is how I was just like, think about, take it in bite size. How I was trying to explain to them was like, here's how we do things in our process. It's like, we don't try to do the whole thing all at one time. We take little bits. I kind of pulled out Rosa's, how do you eat a whale kind of quote. And I started talking about that. And I was like, go and look at it in bite-sized pieces. Look at the base. What is the base made of? Build the base first, then go to the next layer, then the next layer and the next layer. And
so they were thinking by shortcutting that, by doing it all at once, they would win, right? They would get it done faster. Was that the goal, to who could get it done first?
Well, I mean, ultimately they were trying to get as close to being done as possible.
Just
and
complete. Yeah.
One group got closer than everybody else, but it was just kind of interesting because it was a good, honestly, in a way, it was a good team building exercise, because you had to communicate. You had to use all of your critical thinking skills, your memory, the fact that I watched a kid walk over there, and because somebody had moved a table while he was up there, he had to kind of jog around the table to get back to our table. And I could tell in just that moment he was so deep in thought that when he realized that something was in his way, and he kind of and
just
had to go around it, completely lost it. He came back and he was standing at the table and he was just like,
that threw him off.
It was just in the little things. And it was interesting. It was like, what little things throws off your process What little things we do this all the time. We think about like when you get an email and you're in the middle of like doing a design work, and then somebody says, "Hey,
totally.
and then you just
somebody
like, well,
stops at your desk. Somebody
yes,
comes over and just interrupts, and,
and all
whatever
the
their
little
urgent
things,
thing is. Yep, all those things add up.
and
All the distractions, all the bings and bongs on the phone, and yep. This episode is made possible with support from TimberTech. The conversation around outdoor spaces is being redefined. TimberTech, everything wood should be, is at the forefront of a technical renaissance in synthetic decking, transforming how architects approach design. TimberTech's advanced materials merge innovative engineering with striking aesthetics. Proprietary polymer capping and precision color blending mimic the natural beauty of hardwood, authentic wood grain patterns, rich tonal depth, and elegant matte finishes. But unlike wood, TimberTech is built to endure, resisting moisture, fading, and even resist wildfires, with warranties that set a new industry standard. Sustainability drives this renaissance. TimberTech boards are composed of up to 85% recycled materials. For every 15 by 15 TimberTech deck, up to 40 full trash bags of recycled PVC are kept out of landfills. A closed-loop manufacturing process ensures these materials support both your designs and the environment. Flexible design options empower your vision. From multi-width boards to heat-bending capabilities, TimberTech pushes the boundaries of what outdoor spaces can achieve, seamlessly blending with the indoor aesthetic. Explore the advancements behind this shift. Visit timbertech.com/architects with an S to access samples and reimagine your next project. TimberTech, everything wood should be. Go check out timbertech.com/architects and check out everything they have to offer, and let them know that you heard about them on the Archispeak podcast. Our thanks to TimberTech for supporting this episode. Now let's get back to the conversation.
And I don't know if that was fully what they were trying to convey through this exercise, but I could see, like, I was pulling kind of like my own kind of like thoughts is like, think about the way that you do group work at school and all of the little distractions and things like that really kind of like take you away from the task at hand, or you try to do everything all at one time and you're forgetting steps, or you miss steps, or do things out of step. And it was, to me, it was like, you know what, this could be a good kind of like learning exercise of like how teams communicate with each other. And so I just thought, honestly, I'd never done that kind of exercise before, and I thought, dude, this is awesome to do this.
I assume they were not allowed to draw. It was all verbal.
They weren't allowed to draw. They weren't allowed to take pictures on their phones. They had to do it all by memory and just figure out what is the best method of retaining that information, bringing it back to the group, explaining it to the group of what needs to go where, and letting the group actually construct it. It was an interesting challenge. And the mentors even did it too, and we failed miserably as well. It was...
Well, yeah, it's something that you would, I assume, get decent at over time, right?
Oh,
even
sure,
good,
sure.
If you practiced it enough. And I think that's kind of speaks to the idea of, we've talked about it before, specialization versus like a generalization, right? And people who are really good at something tend to continue to have to do that thing. I don't know, have to. I don't know. There's different ways that could roll out. But that is kind of interesting to think about because, like that's what business development people do. They're rainmakers and they're really good at communication, relationship building. Designers are, you would hope, really good at design and communicating, like synthesizing ideas from user groups into design ideas. And then there's people in these steps in the process who are just really good at the different pieces that they do. And then there's the generalists who have to do it all. You have a small firm, you're a single person practitioner, and you have to do marketing and payroll and
billing
all those things.
And yes, exactly. So that's interesting. Yeah. But I don't know if that was what they were expecting for their first day from ACE, but it was actually a pretty interesting opening icebreaker exercise.
Yeah, I like it.
Is getting people to get out of their comfort zone. You could tell that there was some quiet kids in our group and quiet kids in general there. And to have them, to force them into communicating with others and all of that other stuff. It was kind of interesting because you could sort of see them uncomfortable, but able to just, oh, I got this kind of thing. And it's good because it gives them the confidence of like, oh, I've seen everybody else sort of mess up, and obviously I, can't do any worse than that.
Everybody's going to mess up.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And that was the great thing about it, is because you could tell like the senior, he's probably going to become the leader of the group because he's older, he's experienced and all of that other stuff. And some of the quieter like freshmen and stuff, but they'll be very reserved in this. And what was really kind of cool about it was just the fact that they just had to speak. They had to. You could not. Every student had to take a turn going up, looking at this structure, coming back and explaining it to everybody else. And so it pulled people out of their shells without them probably even realizing it. It was just a game to them. But it was a game that, like, if you do that more and more, because, I mean, if you think about it, the more and more you do something that is uncomfortable to you, the more and more you're going to learn how to actually, like, navigate around that, and it won't be as uncomfortable to you.
Possibly.
I mean, you hope. You hope. I mean, I wasn't.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see that? How do you see this exercise kind of tying into your, I don't know, is it a curriculum? I don't know what you would call it, but do you see it going any deeper, like having analogies to other things? Because to me, I mean, the obvious thing to me is like, this is what architects have to do.
Yeah. Why was it
time again throughout the process?
I was explaining to them that very thing as we were talking, as they were going through it. I was kind of explaining to them, I'm like, well, this is kind of an analogy of how architects work, and it's just like, we're here, the teams are like just waiting for that information, and they're like, explain it. And you could see that some of them were like kind of hesitant, like, okay, what did I, what was I saying? What was I doing? What am I supposed to be telling them? And they're like, trying to like pull it out. And of course, I was even made the comment about architects being mind readers and things like that. And just likening a lot of like that whole exercise to kind of like the daily functions of, or like just kind of like the daily whatever we go through in communication challenges, trying to make sure, like, I mean,
the client's going to tell you a million things that they want in their building and make decisions along the way: aesthetic decisions, functional decisions, programmatic decisions, budget decisions. And you have to hear that stuff and you have to incorporate it, right? Like on some level, maybe it leads to another conversation that changes that, right? But at some level, like that, if you're providing architectural services, you have to synthesize thoughts, desires from a client into reality, right? And so the only way to do that is to hear what they're saying and then make it happen. And that may be a solo act, but it's usually a team act, right? So you're bringing these things back, you're coming up with formulating a plan, and then we're going to execute that plan. But then you also have to do it on the construction side. You have to put together the construction documentation that then tells somebody how to do something. And it is an instruction set, literally, right, on many levels. So it's like multifaceted, the thing that you're talking about here, in how it actually plays out in practice. It's in the early phases, it's in the later phases, it's probably in many in-between phases too.
Exactly, yeah. I could honestly see this exercise being used at, the college level when you're like introducing group projects and you're trying to instruct them on the importance of clarity and communication. And even honestly, as kind of like a team building kind of exercise in the professional realm. Just again, kind of emphasizing the importance of clear instructions. We think about like a lot of times on project teams, sometimes when a project doesn't go very well, it's all due to lack of communication, really. And, if you're just clear in thought and clear in your instructions and stuff, it makes things easier. and seeing it from, like, say, the high school level to the college level to the professional level of them doing this exact same exercise, and either seeing them kind of do the same issues, or quite possibly it could be like, hey, like we as a team, we talk enough and we are kind of in sync. This should be something that's, I won't say cake, but hey, trust me, it wasn't cake. It was interesting. It was because, like, the fact that, like, when the mentors did it and they were equally as bad as the students, it literally is all about, like, not just memorization, but communication. It's
Right.
it's this amazing communication tool. I was actually kind of like, yeah, this is kind of a cool little. It feels like a childish little exercise, but it really wasn't.
Yeah. Interesting. Very cool. That's
Uh,
fun.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll. We do know that the project that we are doing is a recreation center for. There's a project that's on the books for a community around here that they're actually designing and building one already. And so we linked up with that client and are just using their program for their project as a program for the students to work on. And since it's a rec center, I'm going to try my damnedest as somebody who's designed a lot of rec centers to not influence them, but just guide them on understanding, but not influence their design and not influence, like, how they go through the process, because it really is like, and that's what's fun about it, is like the learning, the discovery, I've never done this before. Let us figure out what all of these things that we could potentially be doing for the rest of our lives, what all of that stuff means. And when you have a mentor who's just basically telling you what to do, that's not mentoring. That's just
Yeah.
somebody telling you what to do, right?
That's a
So,
boss. Yeah, that's a
yeah,
supervisor.
exactly.
That's an interesting thing that you just said, because the idea of guidance, it means you're not tied to the outcome, right? It's
Yeah,
like you
yes,
have
yeah,
no dog in this fight. You are just,
right.
and you're okay even if it doesn't go how you want it to, right? You're
Oh,
not going
yeah.
to be like, oh, I will not allow this. I mean,
Like, oh,
the difference between that and like a design studio in college is like the work has to speak for the college on some levels, or the studio,
right,
or the
right.
professor, or there's definitely like, well, I'll just say egos are tied to it. It may not be
Yeah,
ego. It may be, many other things, right? It's
yeah,
reputation. It could be other things, right? But in this, you really don't have those high stakes, right? You don't have
exactly. Right, right.
those those frameworks to have to work within. And so I mean that when I was teaching at community college and the students had to do we were doing some digital modeling, and like they had to design a tree house, and the tree house like literally can just be anything.
Right,
I'm not the one who is the decider about how that needs to look, form, function, anything, right?
right.
And so like they had to be creative. And the most the best way to be creative is to let people play, right?
Yeah,
To play with things.
absolutely.
And a rec center is all about kind of play. Like there's a fun aspect, of course, to fitness and recreation, but at the same time, like I could just
Well,
imagine that being kind of a perfect project for that kind of
what
thing.
exactly? Because what's sort of interesting about this project is, the so, like, last term or last year, they did a house, and everybody kind of has an understanding or a feeling about, like, what a house is,
Well, they have
and
a
so
construct, right?
they have
It's
a
like this.
construct, right? And
Usually, it's the thing they grew up in, right? Like that they just
right,
reproduce what they
right,
already know. Yeah.
exactly. And in a very similar vein, is it could totally be that for a rec center. It's just like, I grew up playing soccer there, or I used to go and play pickup basketball, or did rec sports there, or there's a skate park there, or a pool, or whatever. And so they already have a kind of a preconceived notion of what that is. So it'll be kind of interesting as kids who don't really know anything about the planning and all of that other stuff, but they're going to learn what project planning is all about in kind of a really small bite-sized fashion. And it'll be like, okay, how do I think about this project more than just what I think a rec center is. Let's start to immerse yourself into how an architect or an engineer thinks about how you put together this stuff. And it is going to be horrible, right? Like they're going to come up with something and you're going to look at it and you're like, oh no, but it's not your job to say, here's what I think would look better. Why don't you try this? Or why don't, let me draw this up and this would be great. No, let them explore. You said it best, is like, just let them explore. Let them have all of the freedoms in the world to just try to create something that's just not,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
let's take a pause in the program and let everybody know that they can ask questions of the show by clicking on this QR code right here. It just takes you over to askarchispeak.com. You can just type that in your browser, or if you're watching this on YouTube and you don't want to use your fingers to do the typing, you just point your camera. Go do it right now, Cormac. Hurry up.
Doing it.
Take it off the screen. You're taking too long. Here it goes. It's gone now.
I got it.
You got it? Okay.
I did get it.
So askarchispeak.com. Ask Cormac and myself questions that you want to get answered on the show. That just takes you to a web page where you can ask a question. Cormac, please don't submit a question right now. You're supposed to be paying attention. My eyes are over here. All right, enough of our commercial break. So my next question about ACE is, okay, you're talking about the architecture side of it.
Yeah.
Talk about the other two parts and how those work their way into this project along the way.
So they're going to have, it's going to be a design project. They're going to learn about structural engineering. They're going to learn about mechanical engineering.
From structural engineers and mechanical
engineers, because their mentors, not all of the mentors are architects. There's a lot that are contractors. There's a lot that are engineers. And so they'll get an exposure to each of those. But one of the interesting things that I like about this is that they get exposure to how we in the profession kind of collaborate as well, right? That it's not just this solo practice, hero architect up on the hill. I just do everything. And
going back to the fountainhead right now.
Exactly. and it really is kind of giving them that taste of what, how things are created and all of the different complexities of the relationships between all of the different players within this. And so they'll be responsible for, designing a rudimentary kind of plumbing system or mechanical system. And, they will do cost estimating. They will create a schedule,
so you're trying to scare them away. But now I hear it. Now I hear you.
Actually, what's really interesting about all of that is they kind of get into it, because we're not asking them to do some big massive Gantt chart. We're just take a swing. How long do you think that this really takes? And they do. And it is an educated, that they put together, because we have people who give some pretty good presentations on all of these different things that are requirements for their grade at the end of this. If they get a good grade, and that's when they start to earn. Every one of these kids, when they sign up for this project, they do a dual enrollment with the university so that they can get those grades. And that honestly works for their benefit as well too, because they get the opportunity to start picking up college credits. It's awesome. And but I like the fact that it gives them the exposure to all of the different trades. There's lectures, so it's two days a week. Mondays, it's basically a lecture about a discipline or something like urban planning or sustainability or mechanical engineering, plumbing engineering, so on and so forth. And then that Wednesday, let's just put it in the context of say a architecture school. You've got a lecture and you've got a studio. And so studio, you're sitting down and you've got the mentors there with you. They're talking you through kind of the things that you learned on Monday and how that applies to your project. And start from the big picture. You do kind of a urban planning, urban context type thing with your thing. What do you look at to kind of get to that? So how we do those site analysis. all the way down to, okay, now you've designed a building. How long is it going to take to build it? How much is it going to cost to build it? Those kind of things. So it's really interesting how it's all integrated into it. And what's amazing is that you'll find students who really want to do the contracting side of it, and they take that on as that they're part of their contribution to the project. There's people who are more into wanting to do some of the engineering stuff. And then there's others who are like, I want to just do work on the design of it. And so it kind of almost like, flushes itself out that you've got somebody who's interested in each of the different facets so that they're all working on the project together as a collaboration. Again, much like the way we do it on a daily basis.
It sounds like this is way better than talking to a high school counselor who typically has the wrong idea about what architecture is, right? Because all they're going off is what they know, and what they know is probably wrong. And they've steered a lot of kids the wrong way. I remember they steered a good friend of mine who was a year ahead of me toward engineering, and he went through engineering school and then decided to go into architecture school because that was his true passion. But he listened to the counselor, right? And we've seen it the other way too, right? Where it's like there's many people who end up in architecture school right out of high school who should not be in architecture school.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And some of them figure that out. They waste a little bit of time. Yeah. And some of them don't figure it out. Or they don't want to like undo those sunk costs. And they just keep going and trudging through it miserably. Right. And so this is a great way to kind of try the shoes on and not commit to buying them, because you get this taste of it, and there's real professionals. I'm interested in the quality from your perspective, and they don't listen to this podcast, right? So you can be totally truthful here. Like, what are the other professionals like that you're working with in this mentoring program? Go ahead, say it. They're normal engineers, and they're boring.
They're just normal engineers, normal contractors, normal. Honestly, everybody there who is giving up their time, this is all their personal time, to come out and do that. They're passionate about their profession. They're passionate about.
I can't imagine somebody doing this who isn't, right? That's kind of self-selecting. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, just the fact that you're like, hey, how would you like to volunteer with a bunch of high school students to basically teach them what it is that you do for a living? But the way that we're going to do it isn't just, I'm going to give you a real quick 15-minute lecture on what it is, and then you go away. No, you're going to be there every week.
It's not a career lecture, right? It's not a career day.
Right. I mean, we talk about like, how long does it take for an architect? Like, how long is architecture school? What type of what do you do after to, become an architect? And, we talk about like the realities of like the challenges behind school and everything else. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's like we pick a fun project. They get to immerse themselves in it. They get to learn all the different facets behind it. All of the mentors that are there, they want to do this. They're not volunteering there. Basically, we're giving up, 4 hours of actual like FaceTime with them. And then just like commute time. So let's just like yesterday, I gave them 3 hours of my time up until like 8:30 at night to just talk to them about architecture. And I love that because I explain to them, and you can definitely see there's a wide variety of different kids from different walks of lives. And when you and I were going through this, I never had anybody ever come and talk to me about what an architect is. And to be quite honest with you, when you talked about like the high school counselor talking them out of it, I joined the Army right after I finished my junior year of high school. I never talked to them.
I didn't either, right?
Yes. I wasn't going to let them one way or the other what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to do. And I knew I putzed around a little too much in high school and so I had a little bit of growing up to do, but other than that, but the thing that I was telling them is like what I would have loved to do. I was like, if I would have known what I was getting into, would I still do it? Yeah, probably, because I really enjoy doing this. But There are some people who will be like, oh, man, I was really thinking about going into architecture. And they do this ACE program. They're like, maybe architecture is not really what I want to do. Maybe I want to do
Yeah.
engineering.
Yeah. Both ways.
Your friend
right.
who was swayed into going into engineering instead of architecture, if he would have had the exposure of doing this ACE program and then being able to like make that decision, like, no, I really do feel like my passion lies in architecture, or my passion lies in construction management or whatever, then it gives you this understanding. Because I mean, when I was in Baltimore and we did the ACE Baltimore program, none of these kids, when they were freshmen, and all of them, they actually, like, I got to watch kids go through this whole program for like when they were freshmen all the way to senior, and then when they graduate and go off to college and like, start on this path. And you slowly see it's just like they come in and they're like, I just need an extracurricular activity. I'm doing this thing, to them continuing to stick with it and saying, hey, I actually like this. And I really do think that this might be. And I remember when I was doing that, this kid was just like, as a freshman, he was just like, I wanted to be a writer. That's what I wanted to go to college for. I'm like, that's great. It's a good creative program. It'd be fun. And ended up going into architecture school because they found a calling. They were like, this is actually really fun. I get to create. I wanted to be, obviously, was a creative kid because I wanted to do writing, but it was just, didn't really have the exposure to know what they really wanted to do. And when you get that exposure, it opens up doors. It opens up like this whole different, I never had anybody tell me what architecture was, and I kind of wish they did.
Well,
I mean, most of the time,
that.
if you think about it real quick, most of the time, if you think about it, they don't tell the truth. Oh, architecture's great. Come on in. There's all this other stuff.
Well, or you hear the
what's
exact opposite. You hear you could hear
No.
both, right? You could, depends who you're talking to.
And honestly, if you know me, I don't sugarcoat things. I tell them, I'm like, look, architecture's hard, but if you're doing it right, it's going to be hard, but it's going to be fun hard, because you can actually enjoy what you're doing. And if it's tough, sure, it's tough. Sometimes the challenge and the toughness, the challenge is what's really exciting about the job anyway. Yeah. If it was as they say, if it was easy, anybody could do it, or everybody would do it.
Right.
Sorry, I cut you off. You were about to say something.
I don't remember what I was going to say now, so no worries. No big deal. It wasn't going to be that good anyways, obviously.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, so I encourage anybody who might be listening and might have an ACE program in their community to get involved at least once, one year. Try it, give it a shot, and just see how fun it is to. You and I've been doing this for so long because we like talking about what we do. We like sharing our passions for what we do. This is that too. This is exactly that. The reason why I do this is the same reason why I do ACE. It's because I enjoy.
Yeah, I mean,
this.
Well, and it was missing when we were there, right? That this was not a thing that we had.
Oh, no,
not at all. Wasn't a thing. And like you said, nobody told you about what architecture was. You kind of wish somebody did. And if you imagine what back in the time when we were in school, how would we have even figured that out? Like you would have either need to have known an architect, called one up. Who knows what kind of practice you could get in touch with? It could have been a tiny practice. It could have been a huge practice. And not only that, but that's not architecture school. That's not what an architectural education is like at all either, right? And then there's also the community college level, and there's wide range of programs and quality of programs at that level as well.
Oh yeah,
right. And so it's like, man, what a mixed bag. And so I mean, they're not picking you guys. You guys are picking them by showing up and doing this. And so they are getting still a limited view, but at least they're getting kind of a balanced view of the whole process, not just one discipline within the industry. So,
I mean, so I look at it this way. So I don't know how I do know how, and I know this story, and I've told the story of how I,
good
got
that you know the
interested
story of yourself. Yeah.
Well, just got interested in architecture, but It was not. These were the parents of the kids that I grew up around. They were tradesmen. They were hourly employees. They weren't career people. They didn't go to
Mm-hmm.
college. And that's the thing. That's the beauty that I like of this program is just having them exposed to other avenues. Not to say any of that is wrong if you want to go into trade. I mean, I'd love for more and more people to go into trades because, you can have a great job and a great career and everything else in those. But say that you don't want to do that and then you're just struggling with what avenue. Exposure to other things is a way to kind of like open up and show people where that avenue is. And, that's again what I like about this is just giving kids an exposure of, oh, this is I could do this too. Like, yeah, of course you can. If you enjoy it and this is what when you have a passion for it, sure, definitely do it. Don't
Yeah.
tell anybody that you can't.
Yeah, it's exposure into what it's like
Yeah,
to think about pursuing that. Like I think that it's kind of criminal that there's been so many so many examples of you have to go to college, you have to pick what you're going to major in, you
right,
have to do it
right,
in 4 years right out of high school.
right.
And I think that I'm sure that there's still a ton of pressure there for that, but I've also seen a lot, like my kids, for example, are like, I have no idea what I want to do. And I encourage them to explore and
Sure.
not pick because if they do
Right.
pick, like, then it's like, okay, now this is for real. Like, we have to spend our money wisely. You have to be diligent. You have to, we've got to do this in an efficient way, right? Because
Yeah.
the pockets are not loaded, right? So it's like, I mean, there's just a lot of pressure on young kids. A program like this just gives them that exposure to it to say,
Sure.
no, that's really not what I want to do. It's not
Right.
interesting, right? And that's
Yeah.
totally valid, right? Like
Oh, absolutely.
that is not a waste of time. That is actually a great use of time because a waste
Yeah.
of time would be saying, I'm going to go to college for this and then figuring that out, right? Oh,
Right. Right.
terrible,
Exactly.
terrible situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also sort
Yeah,
of
this is great. So I appreciate you sharing. It's pretty cool that there's a yearly thing and
yep.
very very cool. So we'll put a link to it in the show notes for people who are hearing about this
Yes.
for the first time, unaware of ACE mentoring. We've talked about it
Yes.
before on previous shows. I don't know which ones, but this has been something that I've participated in as well. I know Cormac is way more regular in it than I've ever been, but it's been a rewarding experience for both of us and for the
Very,
students
very.
who have been participating in it.
So we will put a as Evan said, we'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Because it's a national
And
program. It's not.
it
It's
is.
not just and there's our regions, but
Yes.
it's all over the place. It's not just in Detroit, for example.
Yep. Yep. In fact, actually, we were talking about it today, and we've got our office. They participate in 4 different regions: ACE
Hmm.
Baltimore, ACE DC, ACE Detroit, and ACE, the Austin area, Austin, Texas. I don't know if they do it in our Arizona office or not, but I'll have to find out. But but if you just think about it, it's all over the place. It's a great program.
All right, man. Talk to you later.